My name is Talia, and I'm 34 years old. And this Christmas, I discovered the cruelest betrayal I never thought my own family would commit. For as long as I can remember, Christmas was my favorite time of year. The smell of pine needles clinging to the living room air, the warmth of sugar cookies baking in the oven, the sound of wrapping paper tearing open. It wasn't just about gifts, it was about togetherness. My family had always treated Christmas as sacred. The one holiday where grudges were set aside and everyone came together under one roof. At least, that's what I believed. This year, everything changed. It started subtly. Normally, by early December, my sister would send out a group message with the Christmas dinner plans. It was tradition she hosted, and we all contributed a dish, laughing as we crowded into her cozy house, shoulder to shoulder. But as the days ticked by, my phone remained strangely silent. I brushed it off at first, telling myself she must be busy. Work was hectic for me too. I managed a mid-sized marketing firm, and December was always a whirlwind. Still, I couldn't ignore the growing pit in my stomach. I checked my phone constantly, waiting for that familiar buzz. Nothing. When I finally called my mother, she sounded rushed, distracted. I asked casually, "Hey, has anyone planned Christmas yet?" There was a pause on the other end, long enough to make my heart drop. She cleared her throat and muttered something about keeping it simple this year. I pressed, but she quickly ended the call, saying she had to run errands. That was the first crack in the picture-perfect family I thought I had. I spent the next few days oscillating between denial and dread. Surely it was a mistake. Surely the text had been sent and maybe my phone just glitched. Maybe they thought I already knew. I convinced myself of 100 different explanations, each one more desperate than the last. But then, scrolling through social media one late evening, I saw the evidence that shattered my illusions. There they were. My entire family, gathered in my sister's living room, dressed in festive reds and greens, grinning in front of the tree. My nephews held stockings, my parents sat proudly at the center, and even distant cousins I hadn't seen in years were there. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt like I'd been punched. The caption under my sister's photo read, "So grateful to spend another Christmas surrounded by the people who matter most." The people who matter most. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe they thought I couldn't make it. Maybe my husband had told them something I didn't know. But deep down, a sickening truth gnawed at me. They had chosen not to invite me. The betrayal was almost too big to comprehend. My own family, the ones I had cooked for, cried with, celebrated with, had shut me out as if I were a stranger. My chest ached, and tears blurred my vision. I wasn't just excluded from a dinner. I was excluded from the bond that defined us. That night, I sat alone in the dim glow of my undecorated living room. I hadn't even bothered putting up a tree this year, something my husband teased me for, saying I was too sentimental about traditions. He wasn't home, he rarely was anymore. Supposedly he was working late again, but I didn't have the strength to argue. As the hours dragged on, I replayed every moment in my head, every conversation from the past year, every time someone had gone quiet when I walked into the room. My sister avoiding my calls, my mother's distant tone, my husband's insistence that I should give them space whenever I asked what was wrong. Space. That word rang in my ears like a cruel joke. They hadn't given me space. They had erased me. The silence of the house weighed heavier than ever. It wasn't just the absence of carols or laughter, it was the absence of belonging. I felt like an outsider to my own blood, my own history. And as much as I wanted to believe this was all some mistake, the photographs told a story that couldn't be denied. I cried until I was empty. Then I sat still, staring at the wall, numb. Somewhere inside, a small ember of anger sparked. If they had really wanted to shut me out, fine, but I needed to know why. I needed to understand what I had done or what they thought I had done to deserve this. It was in that raw moment that I realized my family wasn't the only one who had been pulling away. My husband's late nights, his secrecy, his dismissive comments, they all swirled together with the ache of rejection. The two betrayals blended, weaving a sinister thread I hadn't dared to follow until now. What if this wasn't about me at all? What if my exclusion was tied to him? The thought clawed at me, leaving me restless and uneasy. My mind replayed fragments of conversations, things my husband had said in passing, times he told me not to bother going to family events, times he said my family never really understood me and I should stop trying so hard. I had brushed it off as him being protective, maybe even supportive. But now, in the cold emptiness of my living room, those words twisted into something darker. What if he wanted me cut off from them? The more I thought about it, the more the puzzle pieces began to shift into place. And I didn't like the picture forming. My exclusion wasn't random, it was deliberate. And as the night dragged into morning, one truth echoed louder than Christmas bells. Something was terribly wrong in my marriage, and my family's silence was the proof. But the truth was far darker than a missing invitation. It was a declaration that I no longer belonged. Imagine watching the people you love celebrate together while you sit in silence, uninvited. The days following Christmas Eve felt like slow torture. Every time I opened my phone, another reminder of my absence glared back at me. My cousins posted stories of themselves clinking glasses, my sister shared a video of the kids tearing into gifts, and my mother posted a sentimental caption about the beauty of family togetherness. Each post felt like a dagger sliding deeper into my chest. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat in silence, staring at images of a celebration I had been erased from. The worst part wasn't just the exclusion, it was the laughter. They looked so happy without me, so complete, as if my presence had never mattered at all. And that thought haunted me. I replayed every possible reason in my mind. Did I say something wrong last year? Did I forget to call someone on their birthday? Had I offended someone without realizing it? The uncertainty gnawed at me, turning every memory into a suspect. I called my sister once more. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail, trying to keep my voice steady, asking if something had happened, if I had done something to upset her. No reply. I tried my mom. Straight to voicemail. My father never answered his phone anyway, but when I texted him, the message was left on read. The silence was louder than any insult they could have hurled. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, my stomach twisted every time a holiday song played. It wasn't just that I had been excluded from Christmas, it was that my family had chosen to erase me. And they had done it so publicly. They didn't even bother to hide it from me. That was the cruelty of it. I sat in my kitchen with a glass of wine, staring out the window at my neighbor's house, glowing with fairy lights and laughter spilling from their living room. Their joy amplified my emptiness. My husband finally came home that night, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual. He didn't notice my puffy eyes or the untouched dinner on the stove. He just muttered, "Long day," before disappearing into the bedroom. Something in me cracked. I followed him, my voice sharper than I intended. "Do you know why my family didn't invite me this year?" He paused, halfway through unbuttoning his shirt, and looked at me with feigned confusion. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," they all gathered, without me. And no one told me why. His expression darkened for a fraction of a second before he forced a shrug. "Maybe they just wanted a smaller gathering this year. Don't take it personally." "Don't take it personally?" I snapped, my voice trembling. "I'm their daughter, their sister. How could I not take it personally?" He sighed, exasperated, as if I were being dramatic. "You're always so sensitive about them." "Maybe they just needed a break. Families fight. It doesn't mean anything." But it did mean something. The way he brushed it off, the way he avoided my eyes, it wasn't the response of a supportive husband. It was the response of someone who knew more than he was saying. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing. My mind raced with possibilities. Did he say something to them? Did he tell them not to invite me? Why would he do that? The pain of exclusion deepened into paranoia. I started to notice things I had ignored before. How he encouraged me to skip family gatherings in the past. How he always found excuses to keep us separate from them. How he painted them as judgmental, saying I should focus on us instead. Had I been blind all along? The following morning I tried again. I called my mother, this time leaving a longer voicemail. My voice cracked as I said, "Please, just tell me what I did wrong. I can't fix it if I don't know. I just want to understand." No reply. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, waiting for the screen to light up. Hours passed. Nothing. And then, in a moment of desperation, I logged back onto social media, scrolling through the Christmas photos I had already memorized. That's when I noticed something I had missed before. In one of the group shots, my husband was in the background. He wasn't front and center, he wasn't posing, but there he was, standing near the fireplace, talking to my brother-in-law. His profile was unmistakable. My heart stopped. I zoomed in, my hands shaking. It was him. My husband. At the very celebration I was excluded from. A wave of nausea rolled through me. He had lied. Lied about working late, lied about not knowing why I wasn't invited. He had been there, laughing with them, drinking with them, while I sat alone in this house crying. The betrayal burned hotter than anything I had ever felt. My family might have excluded me, but he had participated. He had crossed the line from bystander to accomplice. I confronted him that night, my voice shaking with rage. "You were there." He froze, his eyes flicking with a flash of recognition before narrowing. "What are you talking about? Don't lie to me. I saw the picture. You were at my sister's house on Christmas. You were there with them, while I was here." His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he would admit it. Instead, he sneered. "So what if I was? They invited me. I didn't want to make it worse by bringing it up." My chest tightened. "They invited you, but not me?" He shrugged, like it was nothing. "I can't control what your family does." His indifference cut deeper than any admission of guilt. He wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. He had chosen them over me. I stared at him, my voice breaking. "You should have been on my side." He didn't answer. He just turned away, as if the conversation was over. That night, I realized I wasn't just excluded from my family. I was excluded from my own marriage. And as much as it hurt, the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. This wasn't about Christmas anymore. This was about betrayal. Layers of it, twisting together, suffocating me in silence. And that's when I noticed the missing pieces of my marriage falling into place, like a puzzle I had refused to see. It wasn't just my family who turned cold, I began noticing the distance at home too. Once the initial shock of seeing my husband in that Christmas photo wore off, I found myself replaying the last few years of our marriage in painful detail. At first, I thought we were happy. I had convinced myself that we were solid, that every relationship had ups and downs, and that ours was no different. But looking back now, the cracks weren't just recent, they had been there all along, waiting for me to notice. I remembered how, when we first got married, he couldn't go an evening without checking in on me if he worked late. He used to bring me small surprises, a coffee from my favorite cafe, a flower from the corner shop, a sweet note scribbled on a napkin. Somewhere along the way, those gestures disappeared. They didn't fade gradually, they stopped, cold and sudden, like a faucet turned off. I told myself he was stressed, that work was demanding, that people change. But now, with the truth about Christmas heavy on my chest, I wondered if those changes were never about work at all. His absences had grown longer, his explanations thinner. Late meeting. Traffic. Had to catch up with the guys. Always vague, always dismissive when I pressed for details. I wanted to believe him, I really did, but every excuse felt rehearsed, like lines from a script he had practiced too many times. And then there was the phone. His phone, once left carelessly on the coffee table, was now glued to his side. Notifications silenced, screen always face down. If I asked to borrow it, he'd bristle, quick to grab it back. He claimed it was because of work privacy, but his job wasn't the kind that required secrecy. He wasn't a lawyer or an agent, he worked in sales. The only secrets worth guarding were personal ones. I remembered one night, not long before Christmas, when he had fallen asleep on the couch. His phone slipped from his hand, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, my heart hammering as I swiped to unlock it, only to find he had changed his password. A new code I didn't know. When I asked him about it later, he shrugged, saying he updated it because his coworkers liked to play pranks. I wanted to believe him, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. Even the way he touched me had changed. His embraces felt obligatory, his kisses distracted, his eyes distant. Nights that used to end in whispered conversations and tangled sheets now ended with him rolling over, mumbling good night before slipping into sleep or pretending to. I would lie there in the dark, staring at the back of his head, wondering what had happened to the man I married. The Christmas betrayal forced me to confront what I had been too afraid to admit. He was no longer my partner. I started noticing smaller things too, things that seemed insignificant at first but now screamed for attention. Bank statements with withdrawals I couldn't account for, credit card charges at restaurants I had never been to, clothes I didn't recognize, tucked away in the laundry. He always had explanations, business lunches, client dinners, dry cleaning mistakes, but each excuse added to the pile of lies. And then there was the way he spoke about my family. He had been planting seeds for years, I realized. Subtle comments that I brushed off at the time but now saw clearly. Your sister doesn't really respect you. Your mom treats you like a child. Why do you let them walk all over you? At first, I thought he was being protective, standing up for me. But in reality, he was isolating me, pulling me away from the very people who should have been my support system. And it worked. Slowly, I stopped calling my family as often. I started doubting my own worth in their eyes, wondering if maybe he was right, maybe they didn't respect me. I let him become the voice I trusted most. Now, that voice was poisoned. One night, about a week after Christmas, I sat across from him at the dinner table, watching him scroll on his phone while picking at his food. The silence between us felt unbearable, so I finally asked, "Do you even love me anymore?" He looked up, startled, and then scoffed. "Of course I do. Why would you even ask that?" "Because you don't act like it," I whispered. He shook his head, dismissing me. "You're just overthinking again. You always do this, make problems where there aren't any." But there were problems. They were everywhere, surrounding me like shattered glass. His words stung, but more than that, they revealed the truth. He didn't care enough to reassure me. He didn't care enough to fight for us. That night, lying in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how many years I had wasted convincing myself that this was normal. Convincing myself that distance was just part of marriage. That his coldness was temporary. That the man I fell in love with was still in there somewhere, buried under stress and time. But the man in that Christmas photo, the one who smiled with my family while I cried alone, was not the man I married. He was someone else now, someone I didn't recognize. The cracks in our marriage were no longer just cracks. They were gaping fissures, impossible to ignore, impossible to repair. And yet, a small part of me still clung to hope, desperate for an explanation that would make sense of it all. Maybe there was a reason he had been distant. Maybe there was a reason he had been at my family's Christmas without me. But deep down, I knew. The puzzle pieces were aligning, forming a picture I didn't want to see but could no longer deny. And then, on Christmas Eve, I finally uncovered what he'd been hiding. On the night the world sparkled with lights and laughter, my home drowned in shadows. Christmas Eve had always been sacred to me. As a child, it was the night my sister and I would sneak downstairs, hoping to catch Santa in the act. As an adult, it was about tradition, my mother's cinnamon cider, the fireplace glowing, the family exchanging gifts before midnight. But this year, my house was silent. I sat alone on the couch, the only light coming from a single candle flickering on the coffee table. I hadn't put up a tree. I hadn't wrapped presents. I hadn't even bothered cooking. Why would I? The people who were supposed to be my family were together somewhere else, pretending I didn't exist. And my husband, the one person who should have been beside me, claimed he was working late. Again. I tried to distract myself with a movie, but the sound of Christmas carols on TV only made me feel emptier. After an hour, I gave up, turning everything off and sitting in silence. My thoughts drifted back to that photo. The one I had zoomed in on until I could see him clearly. Standing with my family. The image haunted me. I couldn't let it go. Around 10 o'clock, I heard his car pull into the driveway. My pulse quickened with anger. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to scream at him for lying. But something inside me told me to wait, to observe, to gather proof before confronting him again. He walked in carrying a bag of takeout. His face flushed as if he had been drinking. "Merry Christmas Eve," he said casually, dropping the bag on the counter. "I figured you didn't cook, so I grabbed something." I stared at him, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Long night at work?" He didn't flinch. "Yeah. Last-minute clients." I nodded, pretending to believe him, even as my chest burned with suspicion. When he went upstairs to shower, he left his briefcase and phone on the kitchen counter. That was unusual. Normally, his phone never left his pocket. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. 10 minutes, maybe less, before he came back down. This was my chance. I reached for the phone first. To my surprise, it was unlocked. For a split second, I thought maybe I was paranoid. Maybe there was nothing to find. But when I opened his messages, my stomach dropped. There were texts from a number I didn't recognize, dozens of them. Scrolling back through the thread, I saw the truth unfold before my eyes. Her. "Can't believe you got away tonight." Did she suspect anything? Him. Not a clue. "She thinks I'm still at work." Her. "I love that your family loves me already." Him. "They love you more than they ever loved her." My vision blurred with tears, but I kept reading, unable to stop. The messages stretched back months, inside jokes, late-night plans, secret meetings. There were photos too, selfies of them together at restaurants, her sitting in his car, even one of them at my sister's house, smiling in front of the Christmas tree. It wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal woven so tightly into my life that I couldn't separate one from the other. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had paraded her in front of my family. And they had welcomed her. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling, bile rising in my throat. My entire body shook with rage, disbelief, heartbreak. Before I could process it, I noticed the briefcase. Something told me to look. I opened it carefully, my fingers brushing over stacks of papers. At first, they looked like ordinary work documents, but then I saw my name. Bank statements. Property deeds. Legal drafts. I skimmed through page after page, realizing what he was doing. He wasn't just cheating, he was preparing to divorce me. Quietly, strategically, making sure the assets were shifted in his favor before I even suspected. My knees went weak. I sank into the chair, clutching the papers to my chest, as if holding them could stop my world from collapsing. The man I had trusted, the man I had built my life with, wasn't just unfaithful, he was calculating my erasure. The sound of footsteps snapped me out of my daze. He was coming back downstairs. I shoved the papers into the briefcase and placed the phone exactly where I found it, wiping my face quickly. When he walked in, fresh from the shower, he looked at me with an easy smile, like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't just ripped my entire life apart. "You okay?" he asked, grabbing a carton from the takeout bag. I forced a nod, my throat tight. "Yeah, just tired." Inside, I was screaming. My heart pounded so hard I thought he might hear it, but I stayed silent. If I confronted him now, he would spin it, twist it, make me feel crazy like he always did. No, this time, I had the proof. This time, I had the leverage. That night, after he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of the truth crushing me. Every laugh he had shared with her, every secret glance exchanged at my family's table, every whispered lie he had told me, all of it replayed in my head. I realized then that my exclusion from Christmas wasn't just a cruel accident, it was deliberate. My family knew. They had welcomed his mistress into their home, into their celebration, while shutting me out. I wasn't just betrayed by him, I was betrayed by them. The loneliness I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had ever known. I wasn't just abandoned. I was replaced. But somewhere in the depths of that pain, another feeling began to stir: rage. Pure, burning rage. They thought they could discard me quietly. They thought I would crumble and disappear. But they underestimated me. If he wanted a divorce, he was going to get one, but it wouldn't be on his terms. The next morning, instead of unwrapping presents, I unwrapped the beginning of a divorce. Christmas morning, I didn't cry, I had planned. The sun crept through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the bedroom floor. Normally, Christmas morning carried a sense of magic, the quiet anticipation of tearing open gifts and sharing laughter with family. But that morning, the only gift I unwrapped was the truth, and it was uglier than anything I had ever faced. I lay in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning. His even breathing told me he was still asleep, unaware that the carefully constructed lies he'd built around me had crumbled overnight. I had the messages, the photos, the papers, proof of everything. Proof that he wasn't just unfaithful but calculating, preparing to discard me while protecting himself. For hours, I stared at the ceiling, battling the urge to shake him awake and scream. But rage alone wasn't enough. Not anymore. If I was going to survive this, I needed to be smarter than him. So, instead of crying, I quietly slipped out of bed, grabbed my laptop, and sat at the kitchen table. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed the words, "Divorce lawyer near me." The search results felt surreal. Law firms with polished websites promised strength, protection, justice. I clicked on the first one with decent reviews and dialed the number, my voice trembling as I asked if someone could see me. To my surprise, they agreed to an emergency consultation later that day. By the time my husband stirred awake, I was dressed and ready, telling him I was heading out for some last-minute errands. He barely glanced up, too busy scrolling on his phone, already planning his day without me. Walking into the lawyer's office felt like stepping into another world. The walls were lined with shelves of thick legal books, and the receptionist greeted me with a kind smile that almost undid me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to cry. When the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Dana, ushered me into her office, I finally let myself exhale. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice calm but firm. And I did. I poured it all out: the Christmas exclusion, the texts, the mistress, the legal documents in his briefcase. Dana listened intently, jotting down notes, her expression unreadable until I finished. When I finally leaned back, exhausted, she folded her hands and said, "You're right to be here. He's not just cheating, he's building a case against you. He's trying to strip you of assets and leave you vulnerable." The words made my stomach twist, but they also confirmed what I already knew. "So what do I do?" I whispered. Her eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "We fight back. But you have to be smart. From this moment on, you don't confront him directly about what you know. You gather evidence. Every text, every suspicious financial record, every document you can access. The stronger our proof, the harder it will be for him to manipulate the courts." I nodded, my hands trembling. "I can do that." She leaned forward. "And one more thing. You have to prepare yourself emotionally. This won't be quick. Men like him calculated, manipulative. They fight dirty. But if you're ready, we can win." Win. The word echoed in my chest like a promise. When I left the office, the cold December air bit at my skin. But for the first time in weeks, I felt awake. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had a plan. Over the next few days, I became a woman on a mission. While he went about his routines, coming home late, making excuses, pretending everything was normal, I was quietly building my case. I copied financial records, photographed receipts, forwarded messages to a private email account. Every piece of evidence was another weapon in my arsenal. But it wasn't just about the legal fight. It was about reclaiming my sense of self. For too long I had let him define me, isolate me, convince me that I was unworthy of love and respect. Now, every secret I uncovered reminded me that the problem wasn't me. It was him. Still, there were moments when the pain almost crushed me. One night, I found a credit card charge for a hotel, dated just 2 days before Christmas. I pictured him there with her, laughing, touching her the way he hadn't touched me in years. The betrayal burned, but instead of breaking me, it fueled me. Each wound became a reason to fight harder. I kept my composure around him, masking my anger with a calm he didn't suspect. If anything, he seemed relieved by my silence, mistaking it for ignorance. He didn't know I was watching, recording, preparing. He didn't know that the woman sitting quietly across the table from him was no longer his victim, she was his opponent. On New Year's Eve, while he was out celebrating with friends, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, reviewing the folder I had compiled. Bank statements, incriminating texts, screenshots of his mistress's photos. It wasn't just evidence, it was my survival kit. I thought about my family, about the way they had smiled with her while excluding me. The betrayal still cut deep, but Dana's words rang in my head. Prepare yourself emotionally. Maybe they had chosen his side. Maybe they thought I wasn't strong enough to stand on my own. But they were wrong. This wasn't just about saving myself from him, it was about proving to everyone, including my family, that I wasn't disposable. That I could stand up, fight back, and reclaim my life. As midnight approached, fireworks cracked in the distance. I raised my glass to the empty room and whispered, "This year is mine." The determination coursing through me was stronger than the heartbreak. I had lost my marriage, my family's trust, and the Christmas I once cherished, but I hadn't lost myself. Not completely. And I wasn't about to let him take what was left. What I didn't know was that my husband had already started plotting his own legal move against me. Sitting across from the lawyer, I realized my marriage was nothing more than a contract he had planned to exploit. The first week of January arrived with a cold bite in the air, but inside me, something hotter was burning: determination. I had gathered everything: Dana, my lawyer, asked for bank statements, receipts, screenshots, even small inconsistencies in his stories that I had written down like diary entries. Each piece of paper felt like a shard of glass, sharp and painful to hold, but necessary. When I walked back into Dana's office, clutching the thick folder against my chest, I felt both terrified and empowered. This was it. This was the moment where my suspicions turned into a case, my heartbreak into a strategy. Dana greeted me with that same steady expression, the kind that made me feel like she already knew what cards were on the table, even if I didn't. "Let's see what we've got," she said, gesturing to the folder. I spread everything across her polished wooden desk, the evidence of my unraveling marriage spilling out like confessions. She went through each item carefully, flipping pages, circling dates, making notes with a pen that clicked rhythmically in her hand. The silence was unbearable. Finally, she looked up, her eyes sharp. "Talia, this is worse than I thought." My chest tightened. "Worse how?" She leaned back, tapping her pen against the papers. "He's not just hiding an affair, he's setting up a full financial ambush. Look here, these transfers to a secondary account. He's been moving money for months, probably years. And this property deed in both your names? He's trying to refinance it under his alone. If he succeeds, you could lose your share before you even step into court." My throat went dry. So he's stealing from me. Legally, yes. Emotionally, absolutely. He's positioning himself as the victim, the stable one, while painting you as, well, disposable. The word made my stomach lurch. Disposable. That's how my family had treated me too, like someone they could discard for the sake of comfort, convenience, appearances. I steadied my voice. "So what do I do?" Dana leaned forward, her tone firm but reassuring. "We get ahead of him. We freeze the accounts he's been moving money into. We file a preliminary injunction so he can't alter property titles or make big financial moves without your consent. And we document everything, every lie, every inconsistency, every way he's tried to cut you off. If he wants to play dirty, we'll play smarter." I swallowed hard. "And what about my family? They know about her." They welcomed her. Her gaze softened for a moment. That will hurt your case emotionally, but not legally. Unless they testify against you, they're just noise. Right now, your focus has to be on him. If you try to fight on too many fronts, you'll burn out. Her words made sense, but the ache in my chest remained. My family's betrayal still felt like an open wound, and part of me wanted to confront them, demand answers, scream until they admitted their cruelty. But she was right, one battle at a time. I nodded. Okay, so we move forward. Dana's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Good, because from what I see here, you have a stronger case than he does. His arrogance is his weakness. Men like this think they're untouchable, but their carelessness always betrays them. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. The next few days were a blur of signatures and paperwork. Dana moved quickly, filing motions, drafting documents, setting up the framework for a divorce I hadn't chosen but was now determined to control. Each step felt surreal, reading my name on legal filings, discussing assets and custody of property as if my marriage were nothing more than a business contract unraveling. But there was a strange empowerment in it too. For so long, I had felt powerless, like a pawn in his game. Now, with Dana guiding me, I was reclaiming some control. Still, the weight of it all pressed on me at night. I would lie awake, listening to him snore beside me, and wonder if he sensed what was coming. Did he know that I had seen the texts? Did he know I had touched the papers in his briefcase? Did he know I was quietly dismantling the empire he thought he'd built against me? If he did, he didn't show it. In fact, he acted more casual than ever, whistling as he cooked breakfast one morning, suggesting we go out for dinner another. The false normalcy was almost more disturbing than his anger. It was like living with a stranger wearing my husband's face. Then, one evening, Dana called me after reviewing another set of documents I had sent over. Her voice was calm, but the words she spoke chilled me. Talia, I don't want to alarm you, but there's something you need to know. Based on the transfers he's made, it looks like he's been funneling money into an account in someone else's name, a woman's name. My stomach dropped. Her? Most likely. Which means he's not just spending money on her, he's trying to secure her future with funds that legally belong to both of you. If we prove this, the court will not be kind to him. I pressed a hand to my forehead, the room spinning. He wasn't just betraying me emotionally. He was using our life, our resources, to build a foundation with her. He was planning a future with her while I slept beside him, blind to the construction of my own replacement. Dana's voice cut through my spiral. This is good for us, Talia. Painful, yes. But good. It shows intent. Judges don't like deceit, especially financial deceit. It could swing things heavily in your favor. I took a shaky breath. So, you're saying, I can win this? She didn't hesitate. Yes. If you stay strong, gather everything, and don't tip your hand too soon, you can absolutely win this. Win. The word felt less like a dream now and more like a possibility. That night, as I crawled into bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling, just as I had so many nights before. But this time, I wasn't paralyzed by fear. I was calculating, steady, waiting for the right moment. Because now I knew the truth. My marriage wasn't built on love, it was built on contracts, manipulation, and lies. And if he wanted to play the role of the clever strategist, he was about to learn what it felt like to underestimate me. But his reaction when he was served papers was far more explosive than I expected. When the divorce papers reached him, he didn't just lose his temper, he lost his mask. The morning the papers were served, I wasn't home. That was intentional. Dana had advised me not to be there when it happened, not to give him the chance to explode in my presence. Still, I couldn't stop myself from imagining it, the knock at the door, the envelope handed over, the realization sinking in that I wasn't his clueless little pawn anymore. I spent that morning at a cafe downtown, nursing a lukewarm coffee while my leg bounced under the table. I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for the inevitable storm. And sure enough, around 11 o'clock, it began. My phone buzzed with call after call, his name flashing across the screen. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. Him. What the hell is this? Him. You've lost your mind, Talia. Him. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Him. Pick up the phone. Now. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, but I didn't respond. Not yet. Dana's voice echoed in my head. Do not engage until we meet again. Let him unravel. His anger will do the work for us. By the time I finally drove home that evening, the air in the house was electric with his rage. He was pacing the living room, papers strewn across the coffee table, his face red and twisted with fury. There you are, he snapped the moment I walked in. What the hell is this supposed to be? He waved the divorce papers like they were an insult written in fire. I set my bag down calmly, though inside my chest was a drum of panic. It's exactly what it looks like. His laugh was sharp, cruel. You think you can just serve me divorce papers and walk away? You don't even know what you're getting into. I know enough, I said quietly, meeting his glare. I know about her. I know about the money. I know about everything. For a split second, his face faltered. Then the mask snapped back on, cold and menacing. You think that matters? You think anyone's going to believe you? You're unstable, Talia. You've always been paranoid, emotional. That's what I'll tell the court. And trust me, your family will back me up. The words sliced through me, but I stood my ground. Maybe they'll back you up, maybe they won't, but I have proof. And you can't erase it. His eyes narrowed, his hands balling into fists at his sides. You're making a mistake. You're destroying yourself. Everything we've built, you're throwing it away because you couldn't handle the truth. I almost laughed. The truth? As if his carefully constructed web of lies counted as truth. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, his tone dripping with venom. Do you really think you can win against me? You're weak, Talia. You always have been. That's why your family doesn't want you around. That's why they chose me over you. The words hit like blows, but instead of shattering me, they solidified my resolve. I realized in that moment that his power wasn't in what he did. It was in how he made me feel. For years, he had twisted reality, convinced me that I was fragile, disposable. But standing there, staring into the face of his rage, I understood the truth. I wasn't weak. I had simply been trusting the wrong person. I may be weak, I said slowly, but I'm not blind anymore. And that's enough. His face twisted, his fury breaking through the cracks. He slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. You'll regret this, he roared. You'll regret every damn thing you've done. I didn't flinch. He stormed out moments later, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I stood in the silence he left behind, my body shaking, my knees weak, but beneath the fear, there was something else, a spark of pride. He had shown his true face, and I hadn't cowered. Over the next few days, his rage became relentless. He flooded my phone with voicemails, each one more unhinged than the last. One minute he begged me to come to my senses, the next he threatened to make sure I ended up with nothing. Dana warned me that this was normal, that men like him always tried to regain control by any means possible. Let him burn himself out, she said. The more he lashes out, the more credibility he loses. But knowing it was normal didn't make it easier. I jumped every time the phone buzzed. I startled at shadows outside the window. At night, I lay awake wondering if he would show up drunk, pounding on the door, demanding to be let in. That fear became reality sooner than I expected. It was a Thursday night, the sky heavy with winter fog. I had just settled into bed with a book when the knock came hard, insistent, rattling the front door. My heart stopped. I didn't need to look to know it was him. I crept to the window, peeking through the blinds. There he was, standing on the porch, his face twisted in desperation, his knuckles striking the wood over and over. "Talia!" he shouted, his voice muffled but furious. "Open the door! We need to talk!" My hands shook as I clutched my phone, ready to dial 911. But I hesitated. What if letting him in was the only way to end this? What if I needed to face him one last time? He pounded harder. "You can't ignore me forever, you owe me this." the anger in his voice mixed with something else, fear. He was unraveling, and he knew it. The thought should have comforted me, but instead, it terrified me. Because desperate men do desperate things. I stood frozen in the hallway, torn between opening the door and calling for help, my heart racing so loud I could barely hear his shouts. And then came the night he showed up at my door uninvited, demanding one last chance. His knock wasn't gentle, it was a storm demanding to be let in. I stood in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, staring at the door as if it might burst open at any second. His pounding echoed through the quiet night, rattling the picture frames and vibrating through my bones. "Talia!" he shouted, voice rough and desperate. "We need to talk. Open this door right now." My hand hovered over my phone, thumb trembling above the emergency number. But part of me froze, rooted to the spot by years of conditioning. How many times had I opened the door to him before? How many times had I let him back in, excused his behavior, told myself he didn't mean the things he said? But this was different. I wasn't the same woman anymore. Finally, I steadied my breath and called out through the door, my voice sharp. "You need to leave." The pounding stopped abruptly. Silence filled the air, heavy and suffocating. Then, softer this time, his voice slipped through the wood like poison. "Talia, please, just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes, and I'll leave if you want me to." I almost laughed at the audacity. 5 minutes? He had taken years from me, drained me of trust, dignity, and love. What could 5 minutes possibly fix? But before I could respond, the doorknob rattled violently. He was trying to open it. My heart leapt into my throat as I realized he hadn't just come here to talk, he wanted in, whether I allowed it or not. "Stop it!" I shouted. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police." His laugh was dark, humorless. "You wouldn't. You've never had the guts to stand up to me." The words hit hard, but this time, instead of shrinking, I felt something ignite in me. I unlocked the deadbolt and yanked the door open, not out of surrender, but out of defiance. He stood there on the porch, his face flushed, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild. For a moment, he looked almost unfamiliar, like a man stripped bare of all the charm he used to cloak himself in. "You want 5 minutes?" I said coldly. "Fine. You've got 5 minutes. But this is the last time you'll ever stand on this porch as my husband." He blinked, stunned by my resolve. Then he stepped forward. But I held my ground, blocking the doorway. "I don't know what kind of lies your lawyer's been feeding you," he spat, "but you're making a mistake. We can fix this." "I can fix this." "Fix this?" I nearly choked on the words. "You stood in my sister's living room with your mistress while my family smiled and pretended I didn't exist. You drained our accounts behind my back. You drafted papers to erase me. How do you plan to fix that?" His jaw tightened, and for the first time, he didn't have a quick retort. Instead, his eyes darted away, guilt flickering across his face before hardening back into anger. "You don't understand," he said, his tone desperate now. "She makes me feel alive. And your family, they wanted her there. They wanted her more than they wanted you. I went along with it." The confession hit me like ice water. He wasn't just admitting the affair. He was admitting my family had been complicit, that I hadn't been paranoid or imagining things. My family really had chosen her over me. My chest constricted, but I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "So you admit it? You admit everything?" His nostrils flared, realizing his mistake. "I didn't mean... No." I cut him off, my voice rising. "You meant exactly what you said. And now? So do I. We're done. There's no fixing this. Not now. Not ever." For a long moment, he stared at me. His face a storm of emotions, anger, desperation, fear. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. "If you go through with this, Talia, you'll regret it. I'll take everything. The house, the accounts, Whatever scraps of dignity you think you have left, you'll end up with nothing. I met his gaze, unflinching. Then nothing will be better than living like this. The silence between us was electric, charged with years of unspoken truths. And for the first time, I saw something new flicker in his eyes, not control, not confidence, but fear. Fear of losing the grip he had over me. He backed away slowly, shaking his head. "You'll regret this," he muttered again. But it sounded weaker this time, almost hollow. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands trembling. My whole body shook as I slid down against the door, tears streaming down my face, not tears of sorrow, but of release. He had threatened me, taunted me, confessed the truth I already knew, and I had stood my ground. For the first time in years, I hadn't let him control the narrative. Still, the encounter left me rattled. The way his hands had clenched, the way his voice had cracked, it was clear he was unraveling, and a man unraveling was dangerous. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump, every creak in the house set my nerves on edge. I had faced him down, but I knew this wasn't over. If anything, it had only just begun. By morning, I was exhausted, my eyes puffy from sleeplessness. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into my untouched coffee, when I noticed something on the floor by the door. A folded piece of paper slid under the crack. My heart pounded as I picked it up, unfolding it with trembling fingers. The words were scrawled in his handwriting, messy and uneven. "You don't know everything. Check the accounts again." A chill ran down my spine. What did that mean? Was it another threat? A warning? Or a breadcrumb he had accidentally left behind in his desperation? Whatever it was, it meant one thing. There were still secrets buried in this mess, and I wasn't done uncovering them. But what he left behind that night nearly broke me all over again. Among the papers he dropped, I found the smoking gun. I sat at the kitchen table with the note in my trembling hands, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You don't know everything. Check the accounts again." It was short, almost taunting, but something about it felt different. He was unraveling, yes, but this wasn't one of his typical manipulations meant to twist my emotions. This was a breadcrumb, a warning, or maybe a desperate attempt to scare me. Either way, I couldn't ignore it. The next morning, I drove to the bank, folder of documents tucked under my arm. My palms were clammy as I explained to the teller that I needed access to all statements connected to our joint accounts, including transfers and linked accounts. The woman behind the counter glanced at the request, then disappeared into the back. When she returned, she slid a stack of papers across the counter. "You'll want to look closely at the transfers. Some of them seem unusual." Unusual was an understatement. As I scanned the statements, my blood ran cold. There were transfers I hadn't noticed before, hidden deep in the transaction history. Small enough individually to avoid suspicion, but consistent enough to form a pattern. Thousands of dollars slowly funneled out of our joint account and into another name, and there it was. The name I had dreaded but expected, her. Over the course of nearly a year, he had been siphoning money into her account. Not just gifts or dinners, actual, significant sums. He was building her up while tearing me down, ensuring she had security while he was prepared to leave me with scraps. My hands shook as I copied every page, stuffing them into my folder like weapons. But as I dug deeper, something even darker emerged. Another account. Not in her name. Not in his. This one belonged to my brother-in-law. My breath caught in my throat. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Some financial overlap I didn't understand. But the more I studied it, the clearer it became. He wasn't just funneling money to his mistress, he was funneling it through family. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. My family hadn't just excluded me from Christmas to avoid drama. They were part of it. They were protecting him. I stumbled out of the bank in a haze, clutching the evidence as if it might vanish into smoke. The winter air bit at my cheeks, but I hardly felt it. All I could think about was how deep the rot went. My husband hadn't just corrupted my marriage, he had woven himself into my family's fabric, using them as accomplices in his scheme. By the time I reached Dana's office, I was shaking with fury. I spread the new documents across her desk, my voice trembling as I explained what I'd found. She flipped through the pages, her sharp eyes narrowing. This is big, very big. He's not just hiding assets, he's committing fraud. And if your brother-in-law is involved, that makes it even uglier. We can subpoena these accounts. Once the court sees this, it won't matter what story he spins. The judge will have no sympathy for him. I buried my face in my hands. So my family knew. They weren't just shutting me out because of her. They were protecting themselves. Dana's voice softened. It looks that way. But don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Every lie, every betrayal, it strengthens your case. The more he tries to bury, the more we'll dig up. Her words should have comforted me. But the truth weighed heavy. My marriage was gone. My family's loyalty was gone. Everything I thought I could lean on had been ripped away. That night, I sat alone in my living room, papers spread across the coffee table. My husband's note still lay there, its messy scrawl haunting me. You don't know everything. He had been right. I hadn't. But now I did. And I wished I didn't. I thought about confronting my sister, demanding answers, asking how she could let this happen. But what good would it do? The moment they excluded me from Christmas, they made their choice. They had chosen him. Chosen money. Chosen comfort over truth. I poured myself a glass of wine and stared at the evidence until the words blurred. My hands ached from clenching the papers so tightly. My chest ached from carrying the weight of betrayal. But beneath the ache, something else simmered. Rage. This wasn't just about a marriage anymore. This was about dignity, justice. About refusing to let him or my family erase me. The next morning, I called Dana. My voice was steady even though my heart was pounding. File it, I said. All of it. Subpoena the accounts, freeze whatever you can. He wanted war, he's going to get it. For the first time since Christmas, I felt a strange sense of calm. Not peace, not forgiveness, but clarity. I couldn't control what my husband had done. I couldn't control my family's betrayal, but I could control this. How I fought back. Later that night, as I locked the door and double-checked the windows, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. My reflection startled me. My eyes were red from sleepless nights, my face pale from stress, but there was something new there too, something fierce. I didn't look like a woman begging for answers anymore. I looked like a woman ready to burn down every lie that had been built around her. Armed with this proof, I walked back into my lawyer's office, determined to end this once and for all. For once, I wasn't the one blindsided, I was the one in control. When I first sat across from Dana months ago, I had been shaking, fragile, barely able to form words without breaking into tears. But now, as I walked into her office with the thick binder of evidence we had compiled together, I felt different. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't confused. I was armed. Dana looked up from her desk, her sharp eyes scanning me with approval. You're ready. I am, I said firmly, setting the binder down with a thud. Inside were bank statements, property records, text messages, photos, every shred of deceit laid bare. He wanted to erase me. Instead, he gave me everything I need to destroy his case. Dana's lips curved into a rare smile. Let's turn the tables. The weeks that followed felt like the prelude to battle. Motions were filed, subpoenas served, depositions scheduled. Each legal maneuver tightened the noose around him. I imagined him squirming as his accounts were frozen, as the lies he'd spun so carefully began to unravel. And unravel they did. The first blow came when Dana presented the court with evidence of his secret transfers to his mistress. Judges didn't look kindly on financial deceit, especially when it involved funneling marital assets into someone else's account. The judge's face hardened as she flipped through the records, her gavel tapping impatiently as his lawyer tried to explain. The second blow was even heavier, the account linked to my brother-in-law. When the subpoenaed records arrived, the truth was undeniable. Money had flowed between them, masked as loans, but in reality part of his scheme to protect assets. My husband's lawyer stammered, but the damage was done. I wasn't the one on trial anymore. He was. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes during a hearing. He sat across the table, his once confident smirk replaced by clenched jaws and darting eyes. He avoided my gaze, as if looking at me meant acknowledging that I had beaten him at his own game. It was intoxicating. At home, he tried new tactics. His angry voicemails softened into pleading ones. "Talia, please. Let's just talk. We don't have to go through all this. We can fix it." But I knew better now. His pleas weren't about love, they were about control, and control was slipping through his fingers faster than he could grasp it. One night, as I sat at my kitchen table reviewing documents, I thought back to Christmas morning, how small I had felt, curled up on that couch, believing I had lost everything. But now, I realized I hadn't lost everything. I had lost illusions, and illusions weren't worth keeping. By mid-February, the case had shifted so dramatically in my favor that Dana was confident enough to say it aloud. "He's not going to win this. Not financially, not legally. The best he can hope for now is damage control." The words were like a balm to wounds I didn't realize were still open. For months, I had lived in fear of losing everything. Now, for the first time, I believed I might walk away not just with my dignity, but with justice. But then came the twist I didn't expect. My phone rang late one evening. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer, my heart still raw from the family's betrayal, but curiosity got the better of me. "Talia," she said softly, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I froze, my throat tight. "About what?" There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "About him. About why we didn't invite you to Christmas." Her words hit like a blow. All this time, I had convinced myself I didn't need their explanations. But hearing her voice, hearing her acknowledge what had happened, made me realize how much I had longed for answers. I gripped the phone tighter. "Why, Mom? Why would you shut me out? Why would you stand with him instead of me?" Her voice broke. "Because he told us things. He told us you were unstable, that you were angry all the time, that you were losing control. He made it sound like you were the problem, not him. We didn't know who to believe." Tears blurred my vision. The manipulation ran deeper than I thought. He hadn't just lied to me, he had lied about me, poisoning the people I loved against me. "And you believed him?" I whispered. My mother's silence was answer enough. I ended the call, my chest aching. The legal war was turning in my favor, but the emotional wounds were still fresh, raw, and bleeding. My family's betrayal couldn't be erased by court victories. Still, as I sat in the quiet of my living room, I clung to one truth. I had faced worse already. I had survived his lies, his rage, his betrayal. I would survive this too. The next morning, I walked into Dana's office with renewed determination. "Let's finish this," I said. She nodded, her eyes gleaming. "We're close. One final push, and this will be over." For once, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because whatever happened, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one holding the cards. But then my family finally reached out, and their words cut deeper than his betrayal. I thought my family would support me, but their loyalty was already sold. After my mother's shaky phone call, I hoped foolishly that maybe there was still a chance. A chance they'd see the truth, realize how deeply they had hurt me, and finally stand by my side. But hope, I would learn again, is a dangerous thing. A few days later, I received an invitation to meet with them. Not at my childhood home, not at my sister's house, but at a small cafe near the outskirts of town. "Neutral ground," they said. My heart pounded as I drove there, clutching the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. When I walked in, I saw them all, my mother, my sister, even my father sitting at a corner table. For a fleeting moment, I almost smiled, almost believed this was the reunion I had longed for. But the stiffness in their posture, the way their eyes darted from one another nervously, told me otherwise. "Talia," my mother said softly as I sat down. "We need to talk." Her voice trembled, but my sister's did not. She folded her arms, her eyes sharp. "We heard about the divorce. We know what you're doing." "What I'm doing?" My voice cracked with disbelief. He's the one who cheated. He's the one who drained our accounts. He's the one who lied to all of you. My father shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the table. My mother wrung her hands, whispering, "We don't want this to get ugly." "It's already ugly," I snapped. "He brought his mistress to Christmas while you all smiled and laughed. You excluded me from my own family, and now you're telling me you don't want things to get ugly?" My sister leaned forward, her expression cold. "You don't understand, Talia. He's been good to us. He's helped with money when we needed it. He's stable. And you?" She trailed off, her eyes narrowing. "You've always been dramatic, emotional, hard to deal with." The words hit like a physical blow. It wasn't just that they believed him, it was that they had chosen him. Chosen the man who betrayed me over their own blood. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "So that's it? You sold me out because he slipped you money? Because it was easier to believe his lies than admit you failed me?" No one answered. The silence spoke louder than any words could. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them see me break. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. "You made your choice. Don't pretend it was about protecting me. It was about protecting yourselves." As I walked out of the cafe, my legs felt heavy, but my heart felt strangely light. Their betrayal was complete. There was no going back. And in that clarity, I found a strange freedom. I didn't need their half-hearted explanations anymore. I didn't need their approval. I was done begging for scraps of loyalty from people who had already sold theirs. But the pain lingered. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying their words over and over. Dramatic, emotional, hard to deal with. I thought about every moment I had been there for them, babysitting my sister's kids, helping my parents with bills, dropping everything to comfort them when they needed me. None of it mattered. All it had taken was one man's lies and a handful of money to erase me from their lives. The next morning, Dana noticed the change in my voice when I spoke. "You sound different," she said. "I am," I replied flatly. "I don't have a family anymore, not really. But maybe that's a blessing. Now I can fight without worrying about them." Her eyes softened. "Sometimes losing everything you thought you had makes room for the life you deserve." Her words clung to me, echoing in my mind. For the first time, I considered that maybe this wasn't just about revenge or justice, maybe this was about rebirth. Still, the wounds of betrayal bled deep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my sister's cold stare, heard her accusing voice. Every time I thought of Christmas, I saw my husband standing in their living room with his mistress while my family welcomed them. The truth was undeniable. They had chosen him over me. But fate has a strange way of balancing the scales. Just when I thought I had lost everyone, an unexpected voice cut through the darkness. It came one evening as I sat in my car outside the grocery store, staring blankly at the steering wheel, too drained to move. My phone buzzed, and when I glanced down, I saw a name I hadn't heard in years. My cousin. We hadn't spoken in ages distance, family politics, life pulling us in separate directions. But her message was simple. "Talia, I know what's going on, and I need to tell you something." My breath caught in my throat. My fingers shook as I typed back, "Tell me." Her reply came quickly. "I know what they did, and I'm on your side." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something I thought I'd lost completely: hope. But one unexpected ally was about to change everything. Just when I thought I was standing alone, a voice from the past reached out. When I saw my cousin's name flash across the screen, I almost didn't believe it. We hadn't spoken in years. Life, distance, and family politics had created walls between us that neither of us had tried to climb. But now, here she was texting me in the middle of my darkest storm. "I know what they did, and I'm on your side." I stared at the words, my throat tight, my eyes burning. After weeks of betrayal, of silence, of being erased, someone was finally reaching for me. I typed back quickly, my fingers shaking. "Can we meet?" Her reply came instantly. "Tonight. My place." The drive across town felt surreal. The streets glowed with leftover holiday lights, a cruel reminder of the season that had broken me. By the time I pulled up to her small apartment, my chest was pounding with both dread and anticipation. She opened the door before I could even knock. Older than me by a few years. She had always been the cousin I admired growing up, the one with the quick wit, the sharp tongue, and the bravery I never thought I had. Now, as she pulled me into a hug, all the walls I had built to hold back my emotions came crashing down. "I'm so sorry," she whispered against my shoulder. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just clung to her, shaking, letting myself cry in the arms of someone who finally saw me. When we sat down at her kitchen table, she poured us both tea, her expression serious. "Talia, I don't even know where to begin. But you need to know the truth." I braced myself. She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if the walls had ears. "They knew. Your family knew about her. They knew about the affair, they knew about the money," he told them. "Like everything months ago, spun it to make you look like the unstable one, the problem. And instead of questioning him, they went along with it. Because he offered them something in return." Her words hit like hammer blows. "Money," I whispered. She nodded grimly. "Your sister's debts, your parents' bills. He helped cover things. Not out of kindness, out of strategy. He bought their silence. He bought their loyalty. And they sold you without hesitation." I sat there in stunned silence, my tea untouched, my hands clenched around the mug. A part of me had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed shattered what little pieces of hope I had left. My cousin reached across the table, gripping my hand tightly. "But here's the thing. Not all of us agreed. I couldn't stomach it. That's why I stayed away at Christmas. That's why I didn't say anything sooner. I was torn. But then I saw what they were doing to you, and I couldn't stay silent anymore." Tears blurred my vision. "Why me? Why would they choose him over me?" Her eyes softened. "Because it was easier. Because you've always been the strong one, even if you don't feel like it. They knew you'd survive, even if they gutted you. But they needed him. They needed his money, his lies, his promises. It wasn't about love. It was about convenience." Her words stung, but they also lit something inside me. Rage, yes, but also clarity. I wasn't disposable because I was weak. I was discarded because I was strong enough to stand without them. I tightened my grip on her hand. "So what now?" She sat back, her eyes steady. "Now, you fight. And you don't fight alone. I know conversations I overheard. Details about what he told them. I'll testify if I have to. I'll back you up in court. You're not crazy, Talia. You never were. You just needed someone to say it out loud." The relief that washed over me was indescribable. After weeks of gaslighting, manipulation, and betrayal, hearing those words, "you're not crazy," was like a lifeline pulling me back from the edge. We spent hours talking that night. She told me about phone calls she had overheard between my sister and my husband, about the way my parents had justified shutting me out, about the subtle ways my family had twisted the narrative to make me look unstable. Each revelation hurt, but each one also armed me with more truth. By the time I left her apartment, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't walking this path alone. I had an ally, someone who saw me, believed me, and was willing to stand with me in the fire. When I told Dana the next day, her eyes lit up. "This changes things," she said. "A family member willing to testify on your behalf? That could tip the balance even further. Judges look at credibility, and when family members break ranks, it's powerful. It shows the lies are cracking." I nodded, determination coursing through me. "Then let's use it. Let's make sure he doesn't just lose, let's make sure he never forgets what happens when you underestimate me." That night, as I sat at my kitchen table, reviewing the evidence once again, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For weeks I had been fighting in the dark, clawing my way through betrayal and lies. But now, there was a light, small, flickering, fragile but real. I wasn't alone anymore, and with my cousin by my side, I knew the next battle, the courtroom showdown, wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about victory. With her on my side, I walked into court ready for the final battle. Court wasn't just about laws, it was about dignity, truth, and finally being heard. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and paper, a place where lives were unraveled and rewritten with the slam of a gavel. As I walked through the heavy doors that morning, clutching my folder of evidence, I felt the weight of every betrayal pressing down on me. My husband was already there, sitting with his lawyer at the opposite table. He didn't look at me. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe he was still arrogant enough to think he didn't need to. Dana leaned toward me, her voice low but steady. Remember, today isn't about emotion, it's about facts. We have the facts. He has lies. That's all you need to keep in mind. I nodded, my hands trembling despite her reassurance. Across the aisle, his lawyer whispered to him, pointing at the stack of documents we'd filed. He smirked, but it looked forced, his jaw tight, his eyes darting. For the first time, I saw cracks in the mask he had worn so confidently. When the judge entered, everyone rose. My heart hammered as the proceedings began. His lawyer was quick to paint a picture of me as unstable, irrational, prone to emotional outbursts. "This is a woman acting out of spite," he declared. "She is attempting to strip my client of assets that he built through years of hard work." My stomach churned, but Dana remained calm, her pen tapping lightly against the desk as she waited her turn. When the judge gestured for her to respond, Dana stood tall, her voice clear and commanding. "Your Honor, what we have here is not the story of an unstable wife seeking revenge. What we have is a story of deception. A husband who manipulated not only his spouse but her entire family. A man who siphoned marital funds to his mistress and funneled assets through family members to shield them. And we have the evidence to prove it." With that, she laid the first set of documents before the judge, the bank transfers. My husband shifted uncomfortably as the numbers came to light. Thousands of dollars, traced from our joint account directly into his mistress's. The judge's brows furrowed, unimpressed by his lawyer's attempts to interject. Next came the property deeds. Dana's voice was unwavering as she explained how he had attempted to remove my name, how he had forged my signature on preliminary documents. Gasps echoed faintly through the courtroom. My husband's face reddened, his composure slipping further with each revelation. And then came the moment that silenced the room. Dana called my cousin to the stand. My heart swelled with both gratitude and fear as she walked up, her head held high, her eyes steady. Under oath, she recounted the phone calls she'd overheard, the conversations between my husband and my sister, the way my parents had justified shutting me out. "They knew about the affair," she said clearly. "They knew he was lying to Talia. They chose him because he gave them money. They didn't care that he was betraying her. They cared about what they could get out of it." My husband's lawyer scrambled to discredit her, but every attempt fell flat. She was calm, factual, unwavering, and her words cut through the fog of lies like a blade. By the time Dana rested our case, the judge's expression had shifted entirely. Where there had once been neutrality, there was now a sharp, disapproving glare directed squarely at my husband. His lawyer tried to recover, calling him to the stand, but the damage was done. Under questioning, he faltered. His arrogance betrayed him, answers contradicted earlier statements, excuses crumbled under scrutiny. The more he spoke, the deeper he dug himself. At one point, Dana asked him directly, "Did you or did you not funnel money into your mistress's account?" He hesitated too long. The silence was answer enough. When the gavel finally came down at the end of the day, the ruling was clear. The judge awarded me the larger share of assets, froze the fraudulent accounts, and issued a stern warning about his conduct. His mistress, his schemes, his lies, they had all collapsed in the cold light of the courtroom. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness but from the overwhelming release of years of manipulation crashing down, into dust. Across the aisle, my husband slumped in his chair, his smirk gone, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a man stripped of the power he had clung to for so long. Dana placed a hand on mine, her voice gentle. "You did it, it's over." But as I left the courthouse that day, a strange mix of emotions swirled inside me. Yes, I had won, Legally, financially, I had gained back what he tried to steal. But the victory was bittersweet. My marriage was gone. My family was fractured beyond repair. Still, as I stepped into the crisp winter air, I felt lighter than I had in months. The chains of his control had been broken, and for the first time, I was free to imagine a life without him. A life where I wasn't defined by betrayal, but by resilience. I lifted my chin, letting the cold wind sting my cheeks, and whispered to myself, "You're free, Talia. Finally free." As the gavel fell, I realized I wasn't just free from him, I was free from all of them. That Christmas, I wasn't invited, but the next one, I created my own table. The weeks after the courtroom showdown felt surreal. For the first time in years, my house was quiet in a way that didn't crush me. The silence no longer screamed of abandonment or betrayal. It was peaceful, clean, like a blank page waiting to be written on. The divorce was finalized with terms that favored me. My husband's financial deceit had sealed his fate, and the court ensured I wouldn't be left with nothing. He moved out, leaving behind echoes of a man I no longer recognized. When I looked around the rooms we had once shared, I didn't see memories anymore. I saw freedom. But freedom comes with emptiness. There were moments when I caught myself reaching for my phone to call my mother, to tell her about my day, to share a laugh or a frustration. Then I'd remember her words, my sister's cold stare, my father's silence. The family I thought would stand by me had chosen their side, and in doing so, they had lost me forever. It hurt. God, it hurt. But slowly, I began to accept that sometimes the blood that should protect you is the same blood that poisons you. And so, I started building something new. I poured my energy into my work, not as a distraction but as a way to reclaim myself. Projects that once felt heavy became opportunities. I stayed late at the office because I wanted to, not because I dreaded going home. Colleagues who had only known me as quiet and reserved began to see another side of me, confident, determined, resilient. Outside of work, I reconnected with people I had lost touch with. Old friends, acquaintances, even neighbors who had offered kind smiles over the years. Slowly, piece by piece, I began forming a circle of people who chose me not out of obligation, not because of what I could give them, but because they valued who I was. And my cousin. She became more than family. She became my anchor, the reminder that not everyone had abandoned me. We met weekly for coffee, shared stories late into the night, and rebuilt the bond that had been dormant for too long. When I doubted myself, she reminded me of the courtroom, of the look on his face when the lies collapsed, of the strength it had taken to stand up and win. One evening, months later, I stood in my living room staring at an empty corner. For years, that spot had held a Christmas tree decorated with ornaments from childhood, lights that flickered softly against the walls. Last year, that corner had remained bare, a void that mirrored my broken heart. But this year, I decided it would be different. I went out and bought a tree, small, imperfect, but mine. I decorated it with new ornaments, each one chosen not for tradition but for what it meant to me. A silver star to remind me of resilience. A glass heart to symbolize healing. Little trinkets I had picked up during the year, each one a marker of survival. When I stepped back and looked at it glowing in the corner, I didn't feel sorrow anymore. I felt pride. This was my tree, my life, my celebration. On Christmas Eve, I invited my cousin, a few close friends, and even a neighbor who lived alone. We sat around my dining table, my table, not my sister's, sharing food, laughter, and stories. It wasn't the big, noisy family gathering I had grown up with. It was smaller, quieter, but infinitely more real. As we clinked glasses, my cousin leaned over and whispered, "See, you didn't need them after all." And she was right. For the first time, I understood that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, by love, by choice. The people sitting around my table that night were my family. The ones who had betrayed me no longer had power over my heart. When the evening ended and I stood alone by the glowing tree, I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. I had lost a marriage that was built on lies. I had lost a family that was willing to sell me out, but I had gained myself. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. I touched the star at the top of the tree, tears pricking my eyes not of sadness but of gratitude. Gratitude for the strength I didn't know I had, gratitude for the chance to start over. Gratitude for the realization that being uninvited to one table had pushed me to build my own. That night, as snow fell softly outside and the lights twinkled in the corner, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I wasn't broken anymore. I was whole. And as the lights twinkled on my own tree, I realized the best invitation I ever received was the one I gave myself.